Welcome to my basement, everybody. I have a very special guest today. He's a good friend of mine. I've known him for a long time. In fact, Geoff Keighley, who is going to be on momentarily, was actually in our pitch document for the Electric Playground back in 1995 or 1996. We met him early. He was a journalist in Toronto. Covering video games. I think he was a teenager, and he first saw some of our early demo stuff and thought EP was kind of cool. And if you flash forward another 10 years from there, I thought he was pretty cool, and I asked him to be a part of our show. And there's some of my favorite memories. So it's fantastic to have you, Geoff, on the show, and I'm glad that you're here. And it's been too long, my friend. How you doing?
I'm doing great, Vic. It's good to see you. Yeah, I remember getting the VHS tape of the original Electric Playground. It was like 1995. It's crazy, 20 years ago. Yeah.
1995, yeah. And tell me a little bit about what your life was like back then, because you're one of maybe, I don't know, 10 or probably 10 journalists that I know in the video game space that has been to every E3 and has, been covering this business basically for as long as I have. But tell me about your life in 1995. What was covering games like for you back then?
Yeah, I mean, 1995, I was in high school in Markham, Ontario, just north of Toronto, and was writing reviews for video game magazines as a freelancer. I was involved a little bit in TV production. There's an award show for video games in 1994 called Cybermania that I wrote on, and they were creating the company that did that was creating a show called Life on the Digital Edge, which was a TV show that I was sort of involved in writing on. But yeah, I was going to school, I was playing games in my free time, and then it was on, services like CompuServe. And like 95 was right when the internet was just sort of starting as well, so it was sort of, on the internet a little bit, on CompuServe, playing games. And yeah, I mean, I was, wasn't really even traveling to that many events or anything. I was a kid in high school, and yeah, I got to go to my first E3 that year in 1995. So it was kind of a big year. Met you, went to my first E3.
That's amazing, dude. And I mean, the presence of games and the game companies at those first E3s must have been it must have been pretty mind-blowing for a kid like yourself and a kid like me. I was a kid then too, for Christ's sakes. But like these huge booths and these huge parties and all that stuff. Were you anticipating that? Had you already gone to the CES trade shows before? Or
No, I don't think I had. E3 was really the first thing, and I remember it was in LA, and my father was in town. He drove me up to the convention center, and I kind of walked in, and I remember I had like a little suit on. I was like so excited to be there. I was a kid, and one of the things with E3 was that they had a rule that you had to be 18 or older to get into E3.
Right.
So I remember I had to write a letter to the guy, Doug Lowenstein, who ran ESA,
Sure.
that put together E3, asking special permission to be able to go into E3, because I was, I think, 15, 16 years old at the time. And he granted me permission. So I remember I had on my suit, and in my lapel pocket I had this little letter from Doug, and I walked up to the front door of E3, and the security guy says, "Hey, can I see your ID?" And I pulled out my letter proudly and said, "Hey, look at this. I'm official. I can get inside." And yeah, it was amazing. I mean, you got to go inside, see all these amazing heroes of the gaming industry. The first E3 was when the first PlayStation was just about to launch in America. So I remember going to that party on the Sony lot in Culver City, and
Yep.
Michael Jackson showed up, and he was there at the ice cream parlor, and they shut it down so he'd go get his ice cream, and he went to go play Ridge Racer, and it was all this stuff that was crazy. I mean, that was, I think, in like May. I think I was still in high school, and it's just crazy to me to sort of have that experience as a young kid. And I mean, the industry was just starting out then. So yeah, I'm grateful that I sort of got to grow up with the gaming industry, and yeah, I always have a special affinity for E3 because that was one of really the first big gaming event that I got to go to.
Well, obviously, you and I were just talking before we started rolling here. E3 has changed tremendously over the years. There was that kind of slow period while we were all hanging out on the beach singing "Kumbaya" in Santa Monica, which was kind of crazy because it didn't feel like the E3 that we had remembered. But it's going through more changes. We just heard about the EA pulling out. Nintendo has had more off-site presence in the last few years. What are your thoughts on E3 right now? How are we looking at E3 or for E3 in 2016 and going forward?
Well, E3 is such an institution for the industry. I think it's really important. Like when I do the live coverage on YouTube now, it's amazing. I mean, last year when we streamed E3 on YouTube, it was the biggest live stream of the year on YouTube globally for anything.
That's right.
It's a special moment where the gaming industry gets a lot more mainstream attention. So I think all of us hold on to it very tightly and care about that week and what E3 means. And even when you talk to someone who doesn't really play games all the time, even if you mention E3, it's sort of a name or brand that people are like, oh yeah, I kind of heard of that. Like I know what that is. So I think E3 as an entity is really important. The challenge is that the E3 when it first started, when I first went, it was for press and it was for retailers. And at that point, retail was, you remember, like your local video game store, right? And
Yeah.
mom and pop retailers would go check out games, and press was, sort of print press, a little bit of electronic press, and that was the old format of it. I think what's happened, certainly over the past, 5 to 7 years, is that the landscape of retail has changed. The landscape of press has changed. I mean, you and I live through that every day. What is the definition of press?
Yep.
Who is an influencer? Who is a journalist? So I think, E3 needs to evolve, and I think that's what we're starting to see this year is another sense of evolution. And you're right. You remember those 2 years in Santa Monica where sort of E3 scaled back a little bit, and then I think everyone said, oh, we don't like this. We like the big spectacle of E3,
Yeah.
and they built it back up again. I mean, I think it's inevitable that I hope E3 will start to, open itself a little bit more to consumers and, the fans. And I know they let some influencers in last year. I think it's just that the ESA that runs E3 is in a very difficult position because they have to make everyone happy. And I know that a little bit, from working on Game Awards and working with everyone. It's like everyone has different priorities, different schedules of when games are ready. It's not easy. So I think, they're trying to adapt as quickly as they can to sort of the shifts in the market. But I think everyone at the top of the game industry, like the CEO level, everyone believes in E3 as something really important for everyone to put competition aside and showcase the best game work out there. So I think it will always be an important beat for our industry. It's just gonna shift a little bit in terms of its perspective.
Give me your thoughts on games as an industry right now, as an entertainment medium. I mean, I know that you're a lifelong gamer like myself, and you'll be playing forever, and you love this industry, and you love the people that make these games and the entertainment that they provide us. But what are your thoughts right now on the current state of games?
Well, I mean, games is such a broad category now, right? And I think, when we were growing up, games were, I grew up as sort of a PC gamer, playing old adventure games, and then sort of slowly, I think, moved to become more of a console gamer. And now, I mean, games, it's like, it's on your phone, it's on your TV, it's, console, PC. I think the gaming category has never been stronger. I just think the definition of gaming has shifted. And, I look at when people report the sales results for games, they're reporting physical sales and so much is digital, right? I mean, now pretty much all of the games that I get are all digital, right? Download, and I'll, download them in LA or New York or wherever I am and play them. So I think gaming is evolving. And I think it's in a good spot. I think the, traditional console game industry is shifting around. I think mobile is growing in a big way and bringing more people into the mix there. So I think gaming I think it's in a good spot.
It is weird to kind of place it like we placed it even 5 years ago, though, isn't it? It's hard to kind of frame it in a way that.
There's so many tentacles to it, right? And you could say the gaming industry is the hardcore packaged good console business, but then you look at like League of Legends, and that's an industry unto itself.
I totally,
which is completely separate, right? So I mean, there are all these different segments. So I think when you roll it all up, gaming is big, but there's tons of shifts. I mean, you look at a company like Epic Games has gone from being Gears of War Unreal to doing totally changing their business model, right? Now they're all about free to play games and exploring new things. So companies are sort of trying to adapt to this new world order, much like you and I are on the media side, sort of trying to adapt to how people consume media around games is changing. So I think there's shifts, but I don't know of anyone that sort of is, playing less games, right? I think all of us that, when we grew up playing games, we still play them, right? And we may not play them as much as we used to. We don't have as much discretionary time to do it. But I think what's exciting is that the people who, were 18 to 24 back in 1995 are still interested in games, right? I've never lost my passion. You haven't lost your passion for gaming. But, life gets in the way. You get busy. And I think, how you game changes. But I get excited that I think the overall pie of gamers is growing, and way more women I think are playing games now. I think it's way more accessible and diverse because you can play games on your phone. And I mean, there's stuff on your phone now that looks just as good as console titles. Which is pretty exciting. So I think overall the industry is in a good spot. It's just constantly evolving. But I mean, with the rate of technology out there now, it's like that's what's exciting about games is they're never stagnant.
We've had a pretty big announcement with Oculus already dropping their price at CES. Yeah. What are your thoughts right now so far on VR as it pertains to gaming and culture and consumption and crossover, I guess, into.
I am pretty bullish on VR. I was never big on 3D. I thought that was a fad, and it did go away.
Yeah.
You remember whenever it was like, PlayStation was all about 3D for your games and Call of Duty. And
I have
like
one of those 3D TVs still.
I was never a big believer in that. I think VR, there definitely is something there. I think it complements the existing game experience. I don't think it's going to replace it. And it's also going to take years to ramp it up. Oculus, Vive, PlayStation VR will all be out this year. I think they'll be expensive. They'll be first movers that will sort of come in and buy it and experience it. It is, as you know, is a really compelling experience, especially when you get to interact with the game. Oculus with the Xbox controller is an okay experience. I think once you get Oculus Touch, once you get the Vive controls or the moves with Morpheus, that starts to become really, really interesting. And I think VR will be compelling for short session games. I think it is really powerful and immersive. And I'm actually really bullish on the sort of non-game applications for like watching video, other sort of interactive dimensions to it. So
virtual concerts and things like that.
Yeah, I definitely think there is something there. Even like Gear VR, I played around with, and that's pretty compelling. That's the mobile phone you just sort of put into the visor.
Yeah.
So I think it's only going to help grow the gaming business. I don't think you're going to the console is dead and you're just going to play in VR now. I think it'll be a different genre of gaming, and I think it'll be pretty compelling. Yeah. So yeah, I like it. I just think it's something that is going to be years away. Morpheus, I think, or PlayStation VR, I think is going to do well because they have a big installed base for PlayStation 4 to build on. Oculus and Vive, you got to have a high-powered PC to run that, and those things are not going to be cheap. But there are millions of people that have PCs that will run that thing. So I think VR is going to be fun.
You are a broadcaster that understands the importance of framing good stories around these types of things with the awards and with the E3 live shows that you do and various other events and things that you host and produce. How would you tackle VR, and how are you tackling it? Is it going to be part of the E3 awards and then your game awards this year?
Yeah, we'll probably have a best VR category because I do think it's sort of a different genre of gaming, and I think there's enough excitement across all the platforms that VR is I always say with any awards, it's like you need to have 5 good nominees that aren't just in the category because they're the 5 games that exist.
Right. Like Mortal Kombat was the best fighting game last year.
Yeah, you gotta struggle to think of the games. And people get upset when we get rid of a category. I'm like, well, it should be an honor to be nominated. It shouldn't just be sort of de facto you get nominated because you are one of the 5 games.
Right.
And I think VR, there's certainly enough stuff this year to warrant consideration. And we did that a few years ago with Best Motion Control Game, right? That was a fad where you had, you had the Wiimote, you had the Move, and you had Kinect, and that was sort of a phenomenon. And
certainly
then we got rid
was
of it
a fad. Woo, gone.
Yeah, so that's gone. I think VR there's definitely something sustainable there.
Yeah.
How big it is, I think, is sort of, it's up for debate and will grow over time, and it should, right? The worst thing that can happen is that, there's this huge hype around VR, and then it comes out, no one buys it, and everyone's like, oh, that market's dead. It needs to sort of slowly grow.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty excited that, this year,
these headsets are going to be out. I mean, Oculus is going to be out, just like 6 weeks, 8 weeks from now, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. Battlefront came out last year, and I loved it. I thought EA and DICE did a great job with it. I know it's expensive, and I know that it's not as robust content-wise as Battlefront 1 or 2 were from Pandemic, but I thought they did a phenomenal job, and I can't wait for the DLC with it. But as it was coming, I really wanted to revisit, and I talked to you about it, our Star Wars Battlefront segments that you hosted for EP for 1 and 2, and I wanted to do 3. And, of course, all kinds of crazy stuff was going on with us because that's right around the time that I found out that we weren't going to be going forward with Rogers, and I had to kind of make some changes. And all of that stuff was going. But also, the marketing for Battlefront started to hit, and they were doing shit that was so incredible that I just couldn't figure out how would we do anything on the show that would look anywhere near as cool as the guy jumping out of the window and onto the X-Wing.
Onto the X-Wing.
Yeah, it was so rad. But I want to talk to you about those days because you signed up for EP. Did you know what you were getting into? I guess you'd seen the wacky.
I'd seen it. Yeah, I mean that was. It was fun because I watched the show for many years, and growing up in Canada, you are a national treasure up there for gamers. That's what you were able to build and put games on the map. And I mean, growing up in Canada, part of the reason I fell in love with games is that it was such a great community around games up there.
Yep.
And, my local A+ software I would go to go buy PC games, and it was just fun back then. So yeah, no, I definitely knew the show, and I was excited when you kind of asked me to get involved, do something. And that first shoot was such an epic shoot, out in the forests of San Francisco.
Was that your first one? Was that your first?
I think so, yeah.
Oh my God, that's crazy.
Yeah, I think it was. I think that's where we sort of started with that big sequence, and it was fantastic. And what you guys were doing, and Tavis, and everyone, I mean, the effects and stuff, were being done in, that was probably 2000, 2001, and before the Freddie Wongs and the Corridor Digitals and all these guys on YouTube. I mean, you guys were doing, incredible work that, the guys at, LucasArts and Lucasfilm would be blown away with what you were doing.
Yeah.
And that's ILM. So it was tons of fun to get involved with that, and I had always been a fan of the show, and loved what you and Tommy had put together with that program. So it was an honor to get involved, and that was before G4. That was before really any other video game television out there, and I was pretty much a print written journalism guy. Like I wrote long form journalism for GameSpot. I wrote for Entertainment Weekly, other places like that, but hadn't really done a lot of video. And I credit joining EP and working with you as really the start of this sort of video revolution for me, and sort of geared me up for what was then G4 when EP was on G4. That led to sort of YouTube 2005, the stuff I was doing with Spike. So in many ways the sort of transitioning to the multimedia side of the world was really, I think, important for me because who knew if I was going to be good at it or not, but it was just something that naturally happened, and I think helped prep me for this video revolution where nobody really wants to read anymore now. They want to see video.
Well, I mean, I saw it back in the early 90s that it was time to put these things on television and to find out who these people were and let them speak for them. Geoff, I think your mic might be rubbing on your shirt. There's some clicks and things like that.
Sure.
So let's see if you can pull that away.
Is that better?
Yeah. Probably better.
Hopefully that's better.
I had good luck with writers. When I've hired writers for the show, I found that they've been really open to changes and getting sort of directed, but then also coming up with their own vocabulary and their own vernacular and being able to just sort of roll with any kind of conversation. And I saw it in you, man. I knew you were going to be great in front of the camera. And I got to tell you, when I think about my favorite moments on the show, my own personal favorite moments in the show, it's those two segments always come right to the top, because to kind of work and conceive of some of the ideas that are going to end up going through so many different people's hands and then seeing the end result is unbelievably gratifying. And you were patient and you were open to whatever kind of crazy stuff we threw at you, and you were playful, and you were and I knew that you would come from a pretty serious sort of academic kind of look at games in a lot of ways. Right. There was a lot of respect around your work and your writing, and I was just really grateful that you were willing to throw yourself into it and trust us and do all
Oh
kinds
yeah,
of
man, that was
stuff.
fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was fun, and it's like you always treated games with respect, but you were willing to sort of have fun with it, right? And I think
Yeah.
that's the thing that I was always trying to balance, and still to this day try and balance kind of the fun and wackiness, but with the fact that gamers are really passionate about our hobby, and you don't want to talk down to them. You want to celebrate our love of games. I mean, what you were doing with EP and Judgment Day and Reviews on the Run and all that stuff. I mean, that was those are institutions. And when I first started even working with G4, it's like you were really those were the shows that G4 looked at as saying, hey, I think this stuff actually could work on television.
Yeah.
And birthed the whole network out of that. So yeah, you were ahead of the curve, and the state of video game TV is it's shifted, right? And now it's moved to online digital platforms. And I worked in traditional television for over a decade, and it was a ton of fun. But now TV is so different, and we watch things on our TV, but we watch House of Cards via Netflix, and it's
Yeah.
like it's not through traditional cable. And that's what I think has been fascinating, is now the quality of the streams is indiscernible. In some ways, it's even usually better than your cable signal.
Yeah.
And I remember when I was, first on, CompuServe or on the internet, and you were watching, movie trailers, and it was like, oh, the 320 by, 180, pixel, trailer, you try and blow up on QuickTime to watch. And
Dude,
now
we,
it's like,
we had postage stamp videos from our E3 trip in '95 on our website on electplay.com back then, and people would have to wait as these things would download. It was crazy. And it really has come so far. But what do you think? You've done a lot of television, as have I, and I kind of just shake my head at what's going on with a lot of broadcasters right now. I feel like they're throwing in the towel more than sort of meeting sort of the tastes of people in a lot of ways. There's a lot of great cable television in terms of scripted stuff and some interesting choices there that are kind of binged and consumed. But in terms of information, other than sort of stodgy news, which I think is also getting hammered right now, they're just not really rolling with this, interactive, all-you-can-eat kind of video universe that we're in right now, are they?
yeah, I mean, I think it's challenging, right? I mean, the nature of certainly unscripted stuff or news, variety style shows on TV. It's like it's tough, and that's not just gaming, right? It's you look at like the entertainment news landscape with like Entertainment Tonight or Access Hollywood. I mean, you can get that all on social media and on Snapchat and Twitter. And I just think that the news comes instantly now. You don't have to sort of wait any period of time to see it. And that's why I've always been a big believer in doing live things. Because I mean, convincing people to tune into television now, it feels antiquated because everything is so instant online. So yeah, I mean, I think TV networks are struggling, right? Especially with this audience, because we program to young guys who are some of the most hyper connected folks out there, right?
Yeah.
It's like gamers have Twitch on their television, they have the latest phones, they have IPTV, they have OTT networks. So trying to get them to kind of roll back onto television is really difficult. But the appeal to me always of television was that we could reach a wider audience, right?
Yeah.
Like when I graduated college and sort of decided between going off to law school or doing more gaming stuff, the thing I said to myself was, if I'm going to pursue this gaming thing, I want to actively kind of work to evangelize this industry to a wider audience. That's when I started writing for like Entertainment Weekly or Time Magazine. It was sort of trying to get games, in new places and speak to a wider audience than just the core.
Yep.
Same thing with television, right? One of the appeals when I decided to sort of leave G4 and move on to Spike, the appeal was that, hey, we're going to go to a bigger audience base to sort of potentially reach that crowd. So I'm still in that mode. I just think now the way to reach a wider audience is like YouTube, right? I mean, that's massive, the size of that audience. That is the mainstream. And that to me is like the biggest cable network in the world, right? And it's truly global. Like that's what's exciting to me, is to be there.
Yeah.
And, being on like a domestic cable television network, I think there certainly are people that watch that way. I just think they tend to, demographically tend to be an older audience that is not as connected. And, I got to tell you, when we do something like the Game Awards, I look on Instagram and there are tons of photos of people watching that show on their 75-inch TV.
Yeah.
But they're watching it through, Apple TV, or they're watching it on PlayStation or other platforms. So, the nature of television is just changing, and in some ways, I'm glad that the stuff I do now is not beholden to the old model.
Right.
Or you have to authenticate your cable, or I have to geo block the show. It can't air internationally, or even the show is there are lots of shows now that are like 3 hours later on the West Coast
Yeah.
because they have to tape delay stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm like, in the world of social media, like I have no idea why things are still tape delayed, but it's the way the system was built. So yeah, I think the TV networks are struggling, and I have lots of friends that still work in that. There I still do work with Spike and other networks, and I'm happy to sort of work with them because I do think there is an audience that that watches TV that doesn't do all the digital
Well,
stuff.
it's amazing. I mean, we've been on YouTube with the show with content for the last month now, and we get a lot of feedback, and a lot of people are asking actively, when are you guys going to be back on TV? When are you going to be back? Obviously, they want more content. I think that's what TV kind of allowed for our show in particular. But I think there is still a crowd that, what happened with us, because we weren't just on cable, we were on City, which is kind of a low on the dial television station, is we had a lot of families join in and watch together. And that really became an eye-opener for me. And we had a lot of women in our ratings breakdown as well. We had a lot of females watching the show. And that's what I loved about being on television, is that we were doing that. We were hitting an audience that doesn't actively search out this stuff. That isn't,
Oh, and that's what's cool. It's like when I was in Canada, like, you said EP was very well distributed on sort of basic networks. So it's like my friends or family members, and then there's a validation there, right? And even the developers in Canada, it's like, oh, my cousin saw me on this video game TV show about, me working on Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time, and that was like, people were like, oh, that's cool that this guy worked there, and it sort of, it helps elevate the medium, right? And I'm all about like, how can we elevate the medium, get more people to kind of understand and respect what this is. So the work that you did in Canada and in the States is, it's really important as this industry continues to grow. And look, I mean, there are very few game designers that are household names, right? I mean, probably, Miyamoto or Kojima are probably the most kind of well-known people, and, still they're not sort of publicly that well-known. And I think, guys like you and I, part of our mission is to sort of help, these creators get the respect that they're due. And, a lot of my work is around that, right? It's like a long time ago, I decided that, I'm not interested in making games, right? And people always, I think, guys like you and I, it's like, are we using this as a pathway to eventually, make this secret game that I've been, designing or something? And I've never really been interested in that. I've always felt that the role that people like you and I can fulfill is really important, is that evangelizing this and helping people share their stories and share our love of all games. And that's like, I would never work at a game company because honestly, it's selfishly, I wouldn't want to leave behind everyone else that I know and all the other great things I get to do. So it's it's been fun, and I think you've done an amazing job mainstreaming games around the world, really.
Yeah, I mean, thank you very much, and you too, my friend. But I feel like a lot more work still has to be done, and I feel like one of the things that's starting to happen with this preponderance, this sort of reliance on Twitch and YouTube for all of the sort of viewership kind of statistics around this stuff, is that we are excluding vast chunks of people that have very busy lives, to the point where they have to scratch time out to be able to play the games, but then to couple that with having any time left to find out about games is really difficult. And I know that if you're curious, you Google some stuff up and you can dive down into a trailer or a Let's Play or a walkthrough or something like that. But I feel like discussion around this stuff with people that make games is still really valuable, and I don't want that to disappear as we get more and more people just doing walkthroughs and Let's Plays and Twitch streaming and hamming it up in front of the camera. That stuff's all entertaining, but I feel like we're kind of losing the voices of the developers and the inside kind of access to the game development community.
No, and that's happening across all media, right? I think,
Yeah.
the idea of, I love great journalism and exploring stories and sort of, telling people what's cool, help discover, a new game. I mean, I think some of the most memorable moments to me, and I'm sure to you, are when, you find a game that you're excited about and you share it with people and it goes on to become a success, and that developer comes back to you and says, hey, thank you for believing in us and our game and, getting it out there. And that's the stuff that I think is, one of the most important roles we can play is sort
Totally.
of, letting developers know what they're doing is cool and sharing it with an audience who then responds to it. And, part of the reason why I think you and I know so many people and have worked with so many people for so long is that they understand that, we've been there since the beginning when they were just starting out, right? And
Yeah.
it's, the Todd Howards of the world, were nobodies 20 years ago, and it's sort of like us, and we've all grown up together, and everyone's worked really hard. But I hope that that role continues to exist, and in this day and age, you're right. There's lots of publishers that will say, "Hey, we can just talk directly to our fans. We don't need to involve anyone else,"
Yeah.
or we can just do a bunch of Let's Play videos on YouTube, and that's fine. And I think honestly the there will be a balance, and there's always sort of this, with anything new, there's this huge gold rush, and everyone's excited about it, and then it sort of self-corrects a little bit back to sort of,
Yeah.
what it probably should be. So it's the thing that I'm always, the thing that I'm always thinking about, and I always have to remind myself, is that we've been doing this for a very long time,
Yeah.
and what's happening this month, or even for you, what's happening with EP now, I think it's, it's just a point in time, and you have 20 years of history behind you, and there'll be 20 years of great stuff ahead, and it's like, who knows where it's all going to land.
Totally. And 20 years of history was not all roses. It was not all perfect.
Sure.
There were lots of moments where we had no idea.
Well, same with me.
Yeah.
I mean, I was, with what happened with G4, and then, with the uncertainty around even Spike and the things I was doing there. It's like, video game TV, and you and I both know this. I mean, we're not making The Voice, or we're not making, some, highest rated show on television. I mean, it's still for a niche audience, and there are lots of people around who don't really understand, what this is. And, you and I have been, I think, a pure play, and, I'm all about games. And when I was doing TV, it wasn't about, that's a jumping point for me to go do my scripted series that I want to make. It's like I've been, from the get-go, it's like I'm going to hitch my wagon to games, and that's what I love, and it's been fun to be around it. It's definitely...
I've learned a lot about being a television producer doing this work, but it's not because I want to go off and produce other TV shows. And in fact, I keep... I'd like to make other shows and see other things get developed and stuff, and I have done some other things out there, but I can't really, as a TV producer, come up with a better pitch or something I'm more passionate about than Electric Playground, than the core idea that I had in 21 years ago. I feel like this constant conversation needs to keep happening, and it actually has been. And I thank everybody that's been watching our vids and the comments and stuff, but I put up that Division thing a couple of weeks ago, and it was kind of a different thing for us, because we're used to our 3-minute package pieces that end up in the show, and maybe we revisit the games over the course of a season, but we let an 18-minute video about one game and a couple of conversations just float, and people seem to respond to it really well, and that was really... And you've done that kind of thing, though. You've been doing that kind of thing with your last 24 hours or the last 48 hours.
Final Hours. Yeah.
Final Hours, yeah.
Yeah.
Talk to me about how that started, man.
I mean, those really, I started in '97 was the first Final Hours, which was the making of the first Half-Life at Valve. I wrote that for GameSpot, and that was, I think I was a freshman in college when I wrote that, and it was, going up to Valve and, being there right when they were just starting the first Half-Life, which is just insane to me, to think of, what Steam and Valve and Gabe have become. But it was, it was driven out of a passion for these creators and the creative process. And like when I would, went down to id Software in like 1993 when they had just shipped Doom, and like to hang out with those guys, I'm like, these guys are so cool, and there's no way to learn about them, and I'm so inspired by them. Would meet John Carmack or Will Wright or Gabe Newell. It's like I was just compelled to sort of tell their stories and explain how these games work, in part because I naturally was interested, right? I mean, those things weren't driven out of anything but a desire to tell their stories, and because I wanted to learn about them. And yeah, it's been fun. I mean, it's literally been 18 years of writing those behind the scenes stories, and I only really do them when there's a story that I think is compelling enough to tell. I mean, they massively interrupt my life when I do those things, because they're 30,000 words, and now they're iPad apps and all that. So I really have to.
And you
be
live
careful
with the
about
developers, man, because those final hours, they're there for, they don't go
Yeah.
home.
Well, and now the funny thing is, Final Hours is it's a little bit different, because now they've got the day one patch, and they've got DLC, and it
Right.
sort of is this
There are no
ongoing story,
final hours anymore.
endless hours for these games. So yeah, I enjoy it though, and it's a lot of fun to do those, and it's about also creating sort of documents of are documenting the creative process behind some of these
Sure,
games. And one of
sure.
the things that I think is missing from this industry is that historical, archival aspect of it. And I think you've done a great job with EP in all these 20 years. And I look at everything on YouTube and everything online. It's I'd love to see a great documentary about the making of the first Doom or the making
know.
of that game, and a lot of that's been lost. And I hope that those books, I mean, when you look back over the past 20 years, I'm really proud that we documented the making of the first Half-Life. I documented the making of the second Half-Life and Portal, and a bunch of these other games. And you've done a great job, I think, too, sort of having that history of this industry, which I worry is lost a little bit. And
Yeah,
that's what I get excited about.
Yeah, because there is a lot of, and I don't want to sound like like an old fart that's just making that's like pissed off that these kids are all in front of their webcams and twitching and streaming and stuff. I'm not. I think that's great. I think that it's awesome that people are building businesses and they're growing their personalities out of that. But it's exactly what you speak of, that honoring the creativity that's a part of this business is a little more than that. And that's been, I think, a creative win for you and a creative win for me in our careers. But you have done a pretty good job, I think. It also, this is actually two questions, because you and I both have been around the business long enough that we reference companies and people like Gabe Newell or Will Wright or Todd but who is emerging now that people should know about? Who are the new, Gabes and Todds and Wills?
Well, I mean, I think there's a lot of interesting stuff happening in the indie space. A lot of those guys are doing fascinating things. Like I'm playing The Witness from Jonathan Blow, and he did Braid, he did this. I mean, he's a brilliant guy. He's pretty quiet, but just as often does great work. And I mean, I'm excited about a lot of those young upstart developers that are doing interesting things. I mean, some of the MOBA guys like Brandon and Mark over at Riot. I mean, they've built an incredible business around that game. I don't think they get nearly enough credit for what they've done there. So that they're always going to be new designers. And one of the things to think about is who are the designers that have been able to successfully transition between generations of consoles and still be relevant, right?
Yeah.
There are lots of guys now. Yeah, right. Kojima's one of the few, I think, that has really done a great job of sort of continually reinventing himself. But look, I mean, there are lots of designers that you and I knew 15, 20 years ago who are, forgotten to history.
Yeah.
Because they either, just didn't make it or didn't make a name for themselves.
Here's what I'm concerned with, especially with EP not on the air right now, right? And the amount of hours that we could do. But there's also no G4. There's, you're not making a daily or a weekly show right now. You're focused on the events.
Nope.
There is no, let's go visit, let's go find out, let's go talk to these people, let's get them in front of the camera, let's discover who these guys, let's see them at work, let's figure all that stuff out. And that sucks, Like I feel like that should be continually happening, and I feel like the business itself, the industry itself, seems to be so focused on just making the games the stars that they're forgetting that people make the games and that people have a lot of currency as well, And I feel like there was a little bit more of that when we were starting out, because we were all in this together, and the PR people that we would work with, and the marketing people that we would work with, and the studio heads and stuff like that would be very accommodating and very much into letting us run around their halls with lightsabers, for an example. But like they were into it with us, and I feel not that it's there's an opposition happening right now, but there isn't that same sort of welcoming. Let's really put these people in front of the camera. Let's open the studios to these guys. Let's make sure that this constant conversation is starting to happen, other than their own efforts with their own Twitch streams and their own Facebook posts and things like that.
Well, look, I think there is something to what you're saying, and I think it's also part of it is just the industry kind of maturing and clamping down a little bit, which I think is natural. But it's also, I think there's a sensitivity out there that the sort of the social zeitgeist right now is at a point where you have to be sort of careful and protect kind of like what you say and who you trust and how you get
look what happened to Adam
involved in that world. Yeah, well, it's just like I think, there's that, but it's also just the general sense of concern, I think. So I don't know. I agree with you. I think people are just naturally skeptical, and look, guys like you and I, we know lots of people. We can make those things happen. But I think publishers are it's more about sort of controlling the message and less about letting other people in to do it. I mean, one publisher said to me famously, "It's like I'm tired of giving someone else a bat to beat us with." And it's sort of like it's like you give the access to people and you get involved, and then people end up writing unflattering things. And as from a journalism perspective, that's sort of the inherent contract you have with someone. Is like, we don't know what we're going to write, whether it's positive or negative, but we're going to come in and do a story. But now, in the day and age of social media and direct access to fans, some of the publishers say, hey, that's a risk we're not willing to take, and we don't want that coverage because the reach of outlet X or Y is nothing compared to our Facebook fan page that has 15 million fans. And if we can just get those 15 million people to buy this game, we're in good shape. I think some publishers and other folks look at the larger opportunity of saying, hey, we need to evangelize what we're doing to a wider audience. We like to cross-pollinate fans of one game into another game, and that's what a show like yours is able to do. It's like sort of celebrating games overall. But I understand that it's a rational decision that people are making around how they approach
everybody's
media.
Everybody's got an ability to create their own media. I mean, it's interesting that one of the South by Southwest awards is about most entertaining online personality in games, and Tim Schafer is one of those guys, and he's a developer, but he's up against Angry Joe and Greg Miller, and it's a fascinating world. We are all media creators at this point, not just in a specific media, but we all, with our social sort of posts and our videos and everything like that, we are all creating all the time. But you have also been a talent shepherd on your own here, working on your YouTube specials and things like that. You've started to corral a lot of YouTubers and personalities that way. Who have you enjoyed working with? And you don't have to diss anybody or anything like that, but who have you enjoyed working with?
They're all... well, actually, there's no one we haven't enjoyed working with. I think they're all, that's the next generation, right? I think, when I was growing up, I started to get into like online journalism, writing, and that's what was the market, right? If I was 16, 17 years old now, I would start a YouTube channel and start covering games in that way. So, those kids I don't think aspire to be IGN writers.
No.
They aspire to have their own channels on YouTube and social media and build them. So they've all been... They're great, and I think a lot of them are. It's interesting because some of them are entertainers, right? And they think they're entertainers, and that's what they do, versus being traditional sort of journalists. And that's just it's a natural shift that has happened in the media landscape from sort of journalism to influencers, and some of them get paid by game companies, some of them don't, and it's like it's sort of murky about how that all plays out, and it's the Wild West right now. So I don't fault any of them for sort of exploring all these different things and ways to kind of be a part of the industry. But all of them have been, great to work with. Done a lot of stuff over the years with even on YouTube. I'm trying to think of folks we've had. From the Felicia Days to the to the Matt Pats and the Game Theorist, Boogie 2988. I mean, we've even Angry Joe, who I famously had a dust up with one year at Video Game Awards. I mean, he's a personality, and I respect everyone out there. I think it comes from a natural place of really loving games.
Yep.
And I don't think anyone's doing necessarily anything exploitive. I think it's a different way of having passion around games. I mean, you even look at like the PewDiePies and the Markipliers and Jacksepticeye and all these guys on YouTube. I mean, they celebrate games. I mean, they're off making their own animated series. I mean, in many ways, they have their own, kind of their own Adult Swim networks that they're building for their fan bases, and they're game fans, but they're also much broader than that. So all of them have been really good to work with, and it's eye-opening to sort of connect with another generation. And it's like, I'm no longer the 16-year-old kid covering games, but I'm really interested in how people are consuming media, who they're connecting with, and that's exciting to me. So to dive into the world of YouTube, it's been an honor to work with them, and I think some of them respect the sort of relationships and the history I have with some game creators, and I respect how they connect to their audience. So it's been a really nice kind of marriage between sort of coming at it from both angles.
And are you now taking some of that, learning and some of that education that you're getting from these YouTubers and also working directly with YouTube and then parlaying that back into relationships that you have with traditional broadcasters too?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the traditional broadcast stuff is so up in the air right now about what they're doing. I mean, I think even for me, it's like, the being a host or personality. It's like now everyone's like, how many Twitter followers do you have? How big is your Facebook? It's like how many Instagram fans? I mean, that's even sometimes more important than the quality of some skills at kind of presenting or hosting. So it's just the world is shifting in that way. So yeah, those guys they're all interested in that, but I also don't know, those young guys, how appealing it is to be on TV. Yeah. I mean, for you and I, that was, for you, that was the holy grail, right? Like, be on television.
That was my dream.
Cool. Yeah. And even for me, it's like when I was up in Canada and family members would see you on television, it's like you had made it, right? That was, even for my parents, it's like having a television show. It's like that is it's a big deal now. Anyone can have a YouTube channel. Yeah. But it's like, what is the thing that really matters? So, there's validation for our industry to be on television. Even when we do E3 on Spike, it's like that's it's important, I think, to have it out there to reach a wider audience. But I don't know when I talk to a lot of the influencers, they don't tell me about how we got to go sell a show to television, and I've always wanted to be on TV. I think they're really happy connecting with their fans on YouTube and social media. And the money is starting to work that they don't even need to think about going anywhere else because they end up doing pretty well just through digital media.
Well, I got to tell you, the throughput, and this, to like getting things done through these social media outlets and these social video outlets is incredible, and it's addictive. There's an allure there, right? It's like, wow, we conceived it. We put it together, and there it is, and everybody can watch it, and they can tell us whether or not they like it right away. It's amazing, because it is a push-pull that you just don't get when you're making television. We would kind of, even with the daily stream and our connections with Facebook and Twitter and all that stuff, we just would put it out there and then kind of roll on to the next day and kind of go back into the cocoon of building it and sending it out. But it doesn't work that way with YouTube and Twitch.
Yeah. No, it isn't. And that's why I love the these live shows when I do the awards or I do E3 or other live events. It's great because you're getting the real-time feedback. You're seeing what people are saying on Twitter about it, and you can react in real time. And that's what's fun about it, as you said, versus TV shows where, hey, we just finished it, ship it off to the network, it's going to air that day or the next week or whatever. So it's that's just where it's all going. And for this audience that is so connected and so digital, it makes natural sense because there's the quality of what you can put on television through digital means is great. And I like that what we do at E3, what we do at the awards, and the stuff you do. I mean, it feels television quality, and that's the thing that I think has always been important to us is to do stuff at high quality. And when I do E3, it's not me against a green screen, talking about E3. It's like we treat it like the Super Bowl because that's what matters to us. Same thing with Game Awards. It's like we way overinvest in building, created by, the guys that work on shows like the Oscars and the Super Bowl because, I believe that gaming deserves that amount of respect on their big night of the year. It's got to feel like the Oscars because these guys are just as artistic and talented as the top filmmakers.
And
so
it isn't even about the money, right? It's not even about the money that games make. It's that the medium itself is this creative and this packed with, just spectacle that we should celebrate it in that same sort of capacity. I fully, I back you 100% on all that.
And all I think the game creators, and publishers agree with us on that, and that's why they're backing us. They're huge supporters and believers in what we've sort of built. So yeah, it's worked out really well, and I even though there are bumps along the road and things are shifting, I think the industry's in a really good position right now.
Yeah.
But who knows? I mean, 6 months from now, it could be different. And, what's going to happen with VR? Where's that going to go?
Well, let's talk about some of the 2016 stuff that you're excited about, and some of the predictions maybe for E3. But the first thing I want to do, and we're going to lose you soon, so I want to get a few questions in at least from the people. But
of course, yeah.
Peter Molyneux is a mutual friend, I think, of both of us, and he's been going through a lot of stuff recently. What are your thoughts on Peter and 22 Cans and Goddess and all of the stuff that's been going on with him?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't talked to Peter in a while, but I think he's one of those guys that is trying to adapt to, this new world order. He's a magician with his words and how he sort of sells you on an idea and a concept. And think people like him and Will Wright, you would sit next to them, or I'd interview them, and I'd be like, I'm sitting next to geniuses, and it's like the best people in the world. Like Will Wright, you sit next to him, like this must be like when you're sitting next to like Albert Einstein or something, like totally. Just picking his brain, the way he thinks about things.
Carmack's like that too.
Exactly, those guys are brilliant, and I'm honored that I get to sort of know them and spend time with them. They make me smarter. Peter, I don't know. I mean, Goddess, I think just sort of went off the rails a little bit, and before that there was the Cube or whatever. What was it? We got that thing, the thing where you were tapping or whatever, and the biggest prize in the world with the seven. There was the drama around that with the kid that won it that didn't make any money, and he might have. I think Peter is one of those guys where his ideas just get ahead of himself, and it just sort of catches up with him a little bit. And I love him. I just think he's one of those people where you just sort of you have to treat him a little bit as an entertainer too.
Yeah.
Versus someone that you take full stock in everything he says. It's like he's brilliant at sort of selling you. He would sell snow to the Eskimos, right? I mean, he's brilliant at convincing you of things. So yeah, I feel for him. I haven't talked to him in a while. It feels like things have died down a little bit for him, and I mean, I just hope he keeps making games, right? And the last thing I want to see is people like that just sort of give up or retire. And I mean, he has I'm sure the financial resources that if he wanted to never make a game again.
Yeah, and certainly not in a negative way. Like if he makes the decision that's good, I'm done. But I just don't want to see him go out in flames, just like with anger.
Exactly. And I think there'll be more sort of from him in the future. But yeah, he's a great guy and a good friend, and I gave him money for Goddess 2 on Kickstarter, and I don't feel great about it, but it's that's the sort of the inherent contract you have when you back something on a Kickstarter platform, is that you sort of have to, it's like gambling. You sort of have to be prepared to lose everything, I think, but you want to believe in someone and bet on them, and there've been other Kickstarters that I've paid for that have paid off. So
yeah. Okay. The thing that you're most excited about for 2016?
Good question. Like what I could talk about that's announced. I mean, I guess I'm excited about VR. I think that's really going to be interesting. I think that's something that's going to be a little more mainstream. I think it's going to be the kind of thing like, you remember you used to have a game console, you'd get it, and people would come over to your house and be like, wait, like those graphics look incredible. Let me marvel at it, right? You don't see that anymore, but it's like, oh wow, that's Star Wars, like Rebel Soul. How do they do that? That's incredible. And like, hey, check this out with the old CD-ROM games or technology. I think VR is going to have that element where it's like when you have one there, someone in your family will be like, oh, you got one of those VR things. Let me try it on. Let me experience it. So I'm excited about the sort of water cooler conversation that will come around VR this year, because I think it's gonna make gaming exciting. It's not going to be the thing that kind of is on your shelf now. I mean, if you have a PS4 and Xbox, no one's going to be dazzled by it, because it's like games look great now. But I think VR is going to be that thing that is going to be a conversation starter.
Cool. Okay. Blake, do we have some questions that people have got for Mr. Keighley?
Yeah, we've got a couple.
Okay.
Japan wants to know, after Geoff sort of called out Konami at the Game Awards about the Kojima thing.
Yeah.
He wants to know if there was any negative fallout as a result of that.
Did you make any haters at Konami, my friend?
I probably did. They didn't contact me about it. Yeah, I think that was a difficult situation with Hideo Kojima sort of being caught in between, his Konami deal ending and then working on sort of what he was going to do next. So it was heartbreaking that he wasn't at the show. I thought it was really important to mention something about why he wasn't there, and I'm sure there were folks at Konami that were not happy about it. But I haven't. If I go back to Japan anytime soon, I guess they may make their presence known. But yeah, I have not heard from anyone.
Jeez, that sounds ominous. What else you got, Blake?
Okay, Eddie MC18 wants to know if you guys have any thoughts on Nintendo's NX.
What do you think about the NX, Geoff?
I don't really know much about it. There've been rumors and patents filed and things like that. It'll be interesting to see, what Nintendo's play is and sort of how they're going to fit into the market. I think a lot of people were surprised when Nintendo said they were going to have another home console.
Yeah.
It was, something that Mr. Iwata said before he passed away that was, very important that they kept the home console going even though they were doing things in the mobile space. So I remember, the Wii U, that was, came a year early, and a big bet for that was to get all the third parties on board to, move their Xbox 360, PS3 games to the Wii U, and they had that for a year or two. They had Call of Duty, they had Assassin's Creed, they had all these big titles. Didn't really pan out. I tend to think that Nintendo, is not just trying to make another, PS4, Xbox One, and get third party support over from there. But what is the unique feature? What is the software that goes with that? Is it is it a handheld? Is it a console? Is it some kind of hybrid? I mean, I don't know anything more than what's sort of been
what do you
speculated
want?
Online.
What do you want from a Nintendo console? What do you want?
I don't know. I mean, that's the thing. It's like, the games and the IP are so fantastic, but it's really, the worlds that I fall in love with more than the control schemes or, we don't really need another console. That's the thing.
Yeah. Well, I think that's what I want is I want the console to get out of the way, but to give us access to everything and own it and not have it separated by different stores and different platforms.
I'd love to be able to, even now I travel so much, it's always heartbreaking when, I'm not like you, where I remember you would have your suitcase of like your 3 consoles that you could fly around with, and it's like I just can't do that. So like when I'm on the road, I would love to be able to just like AirPlay, Assassin's Creed to my TV in the hotel and just keep playing. And it's like there's so many times where I would like to play games, but because I travel a lot, I just can't. I would love sort of Nintendo everywhere. And look, I'm not a big fan of the Wii U controller. I mean, the gamepad, I think that's just like it's hard to play with that. And you sort of even with Wii U, you sort of play on that system despite, the controller and things because you love the games and you love the worlds.
Yep.
So I don't know. Yeah, I'll be fascinated to see, what Nintendo does. I mean, that's what makes this industry exciting is that every couple of years there's always new hardware and people get excited about it. What is it going to be? What is it going to do? How's it going to perform? I would love nothing more than NX to be as popular as the Wii and sort of open gaming to a much wider audience.
Right.
Mobile has done a lot of that, so I'll be fascinated. I mean,
it's done a lot of that, but it's also I think people play a lot of mobile games and they hate themselves for it. And I don't think that's a good thing for games.
Agreed. Yeah, no, that's right. And I think that world of mobile is huge, but I don't play Clash of Clans. I don't play some of those. I know there are massive audiences there for them.
Yeah.
So I don't know. We'll see with NX. They still got the Zelda, Wii U game that is supposed to be coming out sometime soon, or I think they said 2016 for it. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's like, what will that game look like? How will that play? It's hard to say. I mean, the back half of the year is so mysterious, and game companies, naturally have sort of shortened the PR cycles around a lot of their games.
Yeah.
So, games now get announced, like Fallout got announced at E3, shipped in November. So,
I mean, Far Cry Primal was another huge surprise too. Who knew that was coming at all, right?
Right. They announced that, I think, November, shipping, in a couple weeks. So that means that who knows how long the ramp will be for some of these games or systems as they talk about them. Even like PlayStation VR, that's supposed to be coming out sometime soon. We don't know when that's coming out, so it'll be an interesting year.
What was your favorite game last year?
Favorite game of last year?
It was Batman Arkham Knight, right?
I mean, there were aspects. I really love the Batman trilogy.
Yeah.
Except those guys did a good job. It felt like they were trying to do a little too much with that game, the Batmobile and all that. And it's like, sometimes just another great story is good enough.
Yeah.
Felt like it was sort of a lot layering on top of it. I did like that game, and it would definitely be in my my top 5. I respected Splatoon a lot from Nintendo, with that just being something completely new and different. It's what people always wanted from Nintendo, was like a new IP that was really fun and different. So I like that a lot. Metal Gear, I respected what Kojima went through
to get that game,
get it done and put it at that level of quality. So that one was really fun. I'm trying to think like the old, those are my favorites. I would say, Metal Gear definitely. I was pretty blown away, especially with the prologue and what he had done there. I mean, that sequence I think is just absolutely probably some of the best engineered game that I played in a couple of years. And the full game I think has a lot of strengths, and it's also has it. I like a lot of story in my games, and I think that game obviously sort of petered off a little bit with the story. I think at certain parts. So yeah, last year wasn't the year where there was like this one game, like the year of like Red Dead Redemption or The Last of Us, where I was like, it is clear, like this is the game that is the best. And I think that's sort of one of the things we found at the end of the year. Like Witcher is phenomenal for big RPGs. Bloodborne, same thing. I did not have the time to really sort of fully grok those games, given everything that's going on. So yeah, I would say probably Metal Gear or Splatoon, I would say, would be the two that were my favorites last year.
Okay. You've got the E3 presentation stuff that you're going to be putting on with YouTube. You've got the Game Awards. What else can people look forward to that you've got cooking this year, man?
I don't know. Those are the two big, you'll see that stuff happening again. There are some new things I'm working on. Probably do another Final Hours story that'll come out at some point this year.
Cool.
And yeah, I mean, I'm just, I'm more and more now think about sort of what are the projects that I can take on that will, truly be memorable and resonant. And, having done, like you, I mean, the grind of weekly television, or even for you daily, it's, it's, I'm sure even for you, it's not to spit the question back to you, but it's like there's you must feel liberated in some way that you get a little time to sort of explore what you want to do and not be on that hamster on the wheel of sort of the same content again and again.
It's different when you own it and you run it.
Right.
Like it's kind of, I love it. I love the daily grind. I like breaks from it for sure, and I like having a full team that I can rely on other people to be there. But I love that we make so much material and get it out to people, and it's especially because I still think that what we do is very unique. Like I feel the way that we've done television around games has always been unique. And it's become very clear when you look back at the 1997 stuff. And you look back at the old historical things that we've done, that we've just been making it up by the seat of our pants and having a good time the whole time, and that still kind of exists today. And we're not kind of building it out of any kind of corporate agenda or any kind of analytic.
No, there's a freedom to that, right?
Yeah.
And you've earned that sort of freedom, even though things change. For me, it's like things have shifted around, but I'm, like Game Awards, it's been awesome to be able to sort of make that happen and make a show that, I can fully control and deliver what I want for the audience. So it's empowering to do that. And I think now, I'm toying with the idea of like, is there a great, long form documentary to do as a film, which I haven't done. I mean, I think to me, it's really about like, what can I create that is resonant, that can sort of add something to the industry. And, I could sit there and do Let's Play videos all day and vlogs and stuff on YouTube, and it's just, there are other people that are doing a great job with that. And I think, guys like you and I, because of the history we have, the stories we know, the people we know, I think it's, the onus is on us to sort of be able to do other things that other folks can't. So I think I spent a lot of time thinking about sort of what are those other projects to take on. And, I have big projects, and the things I tend to do are sort of very big profile things that I have to sort of get myself fully behind. So yeah, I'm working on there's a music festival idea I'm working on that may come together. I mean, there's sort of big things like that I get excited about. So who knows where it's going to go? But it should be an exciting year, and hopefully you and I will be working together on some stuff soon too.
I hope so too, man. I am so proud of you, and I know you got to split because it's time for you to get going. But love talking with you, brother, and we'll have you back on soon. And
Thanks, Vic, and yeah, congratulations on all you've done with EP, and I think the people that watch this, I'm sure, are fans of all the programming. But what you've built and what you've done for the industry has been really, really important. I think you don't get enough credit because you're the nice Canadian guy up in Vancouver. That people don't realize that the basis of a lot of this video game programming really did start with you back in the mid '90s, and it's important, I think, that people recognize that. So Godspeed to you, and we'll catch up soon.
Okay, brother, that's very sweet. Thank you very much, Geoff.
Thanks, Vic.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone for watching.
Okay, that was my friend Geoff Keighley. Everybody are they seeing my desktop right now, or my full? Okay, cool. You would just see a huge Marvel desktop. That was awesome, and I love talking with that guy, and it's surreal for me, I got to tell you, to kind of reminisce and sort of float back through all these people and lives and individuals that I've been able to work with. I've been very, very lucky in my career, and that continues because I have your support, and I'm having a blast. But it is very weird to take these trips down memory lane. I will have some other people from Electric Playgrounds past on this show very soon. But that's gonna be it for us right now. Thanks for watching, everybody. And
thanks for watching, everybody.
And we'll see you again very soon in Vic's basement. And I think we have to say Stitcher, right? Yep. Stitcher! See you later.